Jeeps are renowned for being one of the most off-road capable vehicles on the market, even in a stock configuration. They're also known for being one of the most accessorized vehicles on the market. Wheels, tires, lights, racks, suspension lifts. Well, I'm happy to say that we're ready for the next step in our overland build, suspension lifts. Now, it's not just any lift. I did a lot of research in forums, Facebook groups, things like that, even inquired with text, trying to find the best lift for the money. Not necessarily the best lift and not necessarily an amount of money, just the best lift for me for the money. I'm going to be spending a lot of windshield time in this vehicle between and around our trips, so it's ideal for me to keep the comfort of the original stock suspension. That is key. Typically, if you go with a bottom end lift, inexpensive, you will immediately sacrifice the drivability of the vehicle, and we do not want to do that. We want to keep this as close to stock as possible. Want to find out what lift we went with? Stay tuned. Hey, welcome back to another video here on the Gator Overland channel. I'm John, and in today's video we'll be installing this Mopar 2-inch suspension lift on our Jeep Gladiator. But we're not just installing this lift alone. Everything that you need for the lift is in this box, but as this lift is a complete system, it is not the most complete lift kit. It is missing a few essential components that allow you to recenter the axle after you lift. Typically, whenever you lift your truck, your track bar swings down and it will move your axle over in the wheel well and have offset, make it almost look like you have a crab wall. We don't want that. So, as well as in this box, I'm going to show you a few extra components that we're going to go with to complete this lift. I went with the Rancho front geometry relocation brackets for the lower control arm. I went with the Krawler rear axle relocation bracket, which allows the track bar to go back up into the stock location. I went ahead and upgraded to the Steer Smarts adjustable drag link to ensure that the axle in the front sits evenly on both sides and doesn't move over. Typically it will push the axle to one side of the vehicle more than the other. You don't want that. We went ahead and did an adjustable drag link with the Griffin attenuator. I'm going to go ahead and install a 3/4 inch Daystar spacer and the Mopar upgrade for the steering stabilizer. So, is it just a 2-inch lift kit? No, it is the ultimate Mopar 2-inch. All right, vibration test. I actually downloaded an app that uses the internal accelerometer in the iPhone to feel vibration in X, Y, and Z axes. I'm going to record it, go over a notable road for being very bumpy that you see ahead. I'm going to record, and I'm going to come back and do it again after the lift's installed and see if there's any difference in vibration to say if we have a softer or better suspension. So let's do that. All right, we are at 60 miles an hour. I'm going to go ahead and start and record that. As you can see, the documentation recording there, somewhat of a bumpy road, if you can tell by my hand. Before you modify a vehicle, especially whenever it comes to suspension, it's always a good idea to take a moment to document some static measurements before you do the install. That way you can double check the integrity of the lift itself, whether you've installed something improperly or you have a manufacturer defect. That way you can contact or adjust accordingly. It's as simple as getting a pen, paper, or a pencil, and a measuring tape, and I'm going to go one step further and do a digital angle finder. You just go to all 4 corners of the vehicle and measure at the fender wells. I will have a PDF document I generated, and I'll leave a link to it in the description below to a Dropbox where you can do a before and after evaluation. Alright, I want to apologize by saying that this was supposed to be a step-by-step install video, but we had some complications during one of the recordings, and now it's just going to be an overview of what exactly it took to install this. Simply, you have to go through and loosen up all your lower control arm, upper control arm bolts, remove any hoses and brackets as the instruction says, and once you remove the shocks, pretty much you lift up the vehicle, the whole axle droops, and it was really easy to pop these springs in and out. Even for it being of 2 inches higher, it droops way down, so it's not a problem doing it. The hardest part of this whole install, front and back, was installing these bump stops. What I highly recommend you do, take the bump stop out of the package it comes in, take the provided nut that comes along with it, and zip it back and forth on there. There is some black lacquer paint that is on these bump stops, I guess as a rust preventative, and it binds up in that nut and makes it really hard to tighten. It's already really hard to get in there with any kind of tool. I had to use an offset 1/2 inch boxed in wrench, and it was still at an awkward angle, and I had to use a pair of channel locks to spin and do it. It's just a really awkward angle. Highly recommend to run it back and forth so it's easy to fasten, hopefully finger tight adjustment. Other than that, it was really straightforward. Just follow the instructions. We included the 3/4 inch Daystar spacer up here, and that should give us a total of 2 3/4 inches overall. We also did that in the back as well, so I'm still going to maintain the rake. We're just at 2 3/4 all the way around. We installed Steer Smarts components, and as mentioned before, the Mopar kit is a great kit. It is not a complete kit compared to others for around the same price. One of the main things, once you move your suspension down, your track bar, if you go with a stock track bar, it is very small compared to this. This thing is brute. It is heavy, outstandingly heavy. But that is also a guarantee that you're not going to have any bent components if you get really hardcore into off-roading. So the adjustable track bar allows you to recenter the axle underneath the vehicle after it drops down with the suspension lift. The stock manufacturer track bar, because it's not adjustable, and as your axle swings down, it will actually move the axle underneath its center line of the frame rails, and that will actually have bad tracking, can lead to alignment issues as well as tire wear. You don't want that. You want your axle as center as possible in the natural neutral setting underneath the vehicle. We went ahead and upgraded to the adjustable drag length, and it includes the Griffin attenuator. It is an expensive upgrade, but what this does, the attenuator is a bellows, almost like a shock absorber built into a solid bar, and it is adjustable, and you can replace, you can also just get the solid bar itself. But what it does is it dampens a lot of the bolt to bolt vibration and jouncing that you get directly from the track bar to the steering knuckles, and leaves less of the effect in the steering wheel. So it kind of, instead of being direct, it kind of squishes in between there. So that is an outstanding upgrade, definitely not necessary. I just went ahead and do it, 2 birds, 1 stone. But after that, I went ahead and upgraded to the Fox equivalent of the shocks over here to the steering stabilizer. The original Rubicon one is just fine, and this is probably more of an aesthetic thing, but it definitely is going to make a difference on the road as far as its performance. It's top of the line when it comes to it. Moving right along, the Mopar kit offers these 2.5 Fox shocks, which is an outstanding upgrade. Fox are among some of the best shock suspension component upgrades that you can do for any vehicle or bike, or just they know their shocks. We have the Rancho geometry relocation brackets, and what this does is it brings the location of your upper and lower control arm from the original location, which the upper was up here, the lower was right here, and it brings them down in a linear fashion directly down, and allows you to maintain near, this one's an adjustable, you can do 2 inch, 3 inch, or 4 inch with this one bracket, but allows you to bring down linearly to maintain the original almost plus or minus 1 degree, 6-degree caster angle, which is ideal for maintaining a straight path on the highway. These trucks are a little bit easier on the highway as far as a direct path. You have your JLs, 4-door, and other 2-door alike Wranglers. They can be kind of squirrely on the road. Even if there's slight wind or a deviation in the road, they'll follow them. But with this can guarantee that the tires are tracking straight on the road. The Mopar install specification recommends 4.8 degrees after install of the lift. I also included that 3 inch spacer, so I'm going to be actually less than that after we install the lift. But this allows us to get back within the parameters of stock. The reason why we do this is whenever the axle is moved down this way, if you imagine coming up to a bump and this is the tire, whenever you lift your vehicle, it hits and pushes into the frame before it actually rolls over. Whenever this is mostly flat or closer to the original factory setting, you're moving up and you come over to a bump, it actually just rides over. And that is felt all the way through the frame, which ultimately ends in an outstanding ride, or a much better ride than just having a short arm. The old TJs, they had really short lower control arms, and they were really rough to ride, especially whenever you got them way down and out of the way. So this was an outstanding upgrade as far as maintaining. You can get past this, you can go around not using this adjustable bracket, because as you can see, it is now hanging down a little bit further than what the original mounting location is, and it will get hung on rocks if you're doing off-roading in that nature. If you use a lower control arm that's adjustable with Johnny joints or anything like that, you can achieve your original caster angle by doing that way and keep remain in the same stock location. This was the easier route. I'm going to be mostly flat landing and a little bit of off-road rock crawling and stuff, so this occasional bump is not going to be a big deal for me. The most difficult part to do is putting it back together. These bolts here, anywhere between 180 and 200 foot-pounds. The unfortunate thing is when you tighten those, you either have to have jacks that allow you to set the whole vehicle weight completely on itself, or you have to put the wheels back on and let it settle on the ground. The reason why you do this, you don't want them to be at full flex when you tighten them down, because when you reset the truck on the vehicle and they're already tightened down, you will get a bind in that bolt as it goes back to the stop or the location of just resting. So unfortunately, the last step of this lift, putting the wheels and tires on, setting it on the ground, and torquing these monsters to 200 and 180 foot-pounds front and back. The top ones are only at 80, they're not too bad, but it's very, very crucial that you get the suspension components back into the factory specified torque settings. You don't want anything loose going on underneath here, or you could have a really bad day, or at least opposing traffic could as well. So that was the only real difficult part. Make sure you run the bolts back and forth, or say the nuts back and forth on the bump stops, and find a good way to bite your tongue, because 200 foot-pounds up underneath the vehicle is it's not easy, but I made it happen. Moving on to the rear, it's much like the installation on the front, only easier. In fact, it's quite a few steps easier. You still have to do a lot of the same loosening of the lower control arm, upper control arm, and the track bar, but it's as simple as removing the sway bar end links here, a few hoses and clamps and such to make sure it can droop without stretching or breaking anything, and then really just removing the shocks, and it droops down just enough to be able to put in both the 3/4 inch spacer and spring, no problem. Again, you just want to make sure you have your spring clocked at the right direction to ensure that you have the proper height. If you have it not indexed into the isolator properly, then you could actually have an issue with your spring setting at the right height. But the difficult part, or say the time-consuming part of this, was doing the track bar relocation bracket for the rear. Again, as mentioned, you can opt to not use this and just use the standard rear track bar, which basically maintains the axle in between the two frame rails here. But the problem is, as mentioned in the front, if you stick with the stock track bar that is solid and not adjustable, as this axle swoops down in this method, it will actually push the axle out on one side. So you end up having kind of a crab walking look setup. So what we've done to counter that, I went ahead and did the Krawler relocation bracket here, which you can see this is the original location of the track bar, and it relocates it up here. It requires you to drill 4 1/2-inch bolts, and you gotta make sure I would recommend definitely getting a new 1/2-inch bit. If you have an old one laying around, get a sharp one so you zip right through them. WD-40, and I did 3 steps of drill bit sizes. Really small, a little bit bigger than big, and then knocked it out. But I recommend one that is, unless it's got super torque to it, using one that plugs into the wall will never die on you, unless it's just old. But that was probably the most time-consuming part, but just tighten up those bolts and then put it back up. The next part about it, as mentioned with the front, that is a hard or difficult portion of it, is retightening all the suspension components. Again, you have to have the wheels on the vehicle on the ground on its weight, and then you unfortunately are in very tight quarters, but use a torque wrench trying to reach the 180 to 200 foot-pounds depending on what bolt and nut you're trying to get to. But once you get all those components, it's really just that simple. So let's get this thing back down on the ground and do some angle and final measurements of everything to make sure that we're within the right requirements to be able to even go down the road. Now that you have all your suspension components installed, your wheels and tires are back on the vehicle, and it's on its own weight, and you've gone through and tightened all your nuts and bolts to the specified torque settings, it's time to get a few static dimensions, just like we did before we did the lift, to compare to the stock configuration. So we'll start at all four corners, measure from the ground, dead center of the wheel, up to the fender, and see that we went up equally on all four corners. If you find that there is an issue where it is not equal or going up the amount, our goal is 2 3/4 inches. If you find that it went either up or down from that dimension, you should probably check and see if your installation, you might have a coil spring that is not clocked right or indexed into the isolator. So we're going to go around and check that. We're also going to check the axles for centering between the frames like what we did before. And as simple as that, it's taking a straight edge or a board in this case and going at the dead center of the wheel. You want one that's not high enough to hit the fender but definitely tall enough to go past the tire, and measure up against a solid part of the frame that's going to be exactly the same on the other side so you can get a good roundabout measurement. Last time we were exactly equal, and what we'll do is you pull up against the frame, pull up against the straight edge. We're at 13.5 here by example. We want to hope that it's within at least an eighth or 0 of the exact same thing on the other. What you don't want is one axle to be over here and the other axle to be over here and have a crab walk effect. You'll see offset axles. That's why we did the adjustable brackets and the adjustable track bar. If you do not opt for the adjustable components, there's a good chance that your axles will actually shift over, and it's unavoidable. That's just what happens. The radius arm swings down. As it swings down, it's attached to the axle and it's going to move it over. So we're hoping that we're exactly the same on the other. We're also going to go through and check some angles and see how close we are to the factory settings. These are all things you want to do before you get on the road, because if you get on the road and things are out of whack, your steering could be off, your axle could be enough out of alignment, the thrust angle, to where it could be a really unpleasant, unsafe drive home. So, or at least to the alignment shop, which is where you should go first. Just took this around the block for a test drive to see how center our steering wheel was. It was at about 1230, which was just a quick adjustment of the drag length. No problems there. That was that little sneak peek. This thing is like steering a cloud. I thought the Rubicon suspension was nice. I'm thoroughly impressed with the outcome of this. This is, well, I'm not trying to sell this stuff, but it works for me. It'll work for you for sure. Before that, we double checked the integrity of our lift by going and getting our static dimensions. Everything was level for me. We jotted down some of the angles so we could compare the angle differences from the stock configuration to what it is now. And we double checked the center line of our axles. The rear end, the Krawler relocation bracket, got us within 1/16 side to side. So we are dead nut right there. That is perfect. Now the front adjustable track bar, I didn't mention earlier, but I had adjusted that before installing it to the same length as the factory track bar, so I had an idea of how much the factory track bar would be off. And to be honest, it was about 7/8 of an inch, shifted the axle to one side. Just an easy adjustment after that, and you divide that number by 2, and you're, perfect. It's dead center front and back. So be honest with you, other than maybe some fine tuning things that they could do there, I would say that this thing is almost perfect. So there's only one way to find out. Let's get to the alignment shop. I can't wait. This thing looks awesome. Alright, we're at about the same spot that we started the last time. Cruise set at 60 miles an hour, and I can tell you that just already the suspension is outstanding. The part that I don't have to do is touch the steering wheel. It tracks straight for the most part, but we're gonna go ahead and start and do that 1-minute track going over the same road, 60 miles an hour, and I can tell you right now, this is, if not as close to the stock suspension, it is better. And it's going to be represented on Vibration X. This is outstanding. I love it. Headed to the alignment shop. Got it. Man, that is the best $83 I think I've ever spent. Also, good to note, provide them with the nomenclature that came with your suspension components. If you did just a lift or if you installed your track bar or anything like that, that way they have the torque specs available to them and they don't have to go searching. You don't want them just zip driving that stuff down because it could either be way over torqued or it could not be torqued enough. And it's very important that you have your suspension components to the right specification. Everything is in the green here. All the settings that I adjusted here. The only thing in the red, surprisingly, was a factory adjustment. The toe in was 7/32 out, which isn't terrible, but it's outside of the parameters of what it needs to be, which is 3/32, which means my tires over a period of time would probably start to wear, could potentially have some ball joint wear, things like that. They got that fixed up. He was really impressed that I did this in this shop here, and y'all have watched some of it anyway, and it came out being dead nut, which is awesome. I could tell on the road. And speaking of on the road, this feels outstanding. I already mentioned that it's like steering a cloud, but 60, 75 miles an hour, it's awesome. I've even intentionally hit bumps and everything. It chews them up, right over them. So if you do go with this, you won't be upset. I'm not trying to push you into this, but the idea that I was going with for this lift is I didn't want to exceed 37s. I'm a flatlander. I didn't want to be big on 40s or anything because I didn't want to have to upgrade a bunch of axle components. The Dana 44, as it is a very strong axle, but once you start going over a certain tire size, you got a bunch of rolling mass that you have to maintain, and I don't want to do that. So 410 gears that come stock in the Rubicon or the Max Tow package in the Sport model, or Sport S I should say, is very capable or ideal for 35s. Now if you want to go up to 37s, which I'm on that fence about, I've seen pictures of this exact configuration, 3/4 inch, 2-inch Mopar, and 37s on stock wheels without spacers, off-road, and it looks awesome. I'm a high and tight look guy. I don't like the big offset wheels. You can do whatever you want, but 37s I might go. But that might incline me to have to change to 488 gears so I can maintain my 6-speed gearbox instead of it just becoming a 4-speed. Or a 5-speed in your automatics that are 876 you would probably lose, and it fluctuate between those up and down hills and stuff. But as I said, I'm a flatlander at this point in time. We're going to roll on our tires for a little bit. I already have another set that I found. I will say Facebook is an incredible place to network and stuff, but I found a good set of wheels, exactly these takeoffs for a decent price. So I'm probably going to keep these tires on these wheels, and the exact same wheels I'm going to put some big Dumbos on, and I'll be able to switch them out at least until the time that I could afford to do a 488 gear swap. And I may go 513. I haven't figured that one out yet. I really enjoy it. It looks outstanding, and I hope you enjoy yours if it comes down to it as well. If you enjoyed today's video, found it informative or helpful in making your decision to go with this ultimate Mopar lift we put together, go ahead, give us a big thumbs up. Let us know how we're doing. I'd appreciate that. For a heads up on any future installs or adventures, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, notification bell. You can follow us along our journey. Remember, we at Gator Overland encourage each and every one of you to take a daily moment to unplug and reconnect with the outdoors, even if it's just for a few minutes. As always, we thank you for watching. Have fun, keep it safe, and just go. Thanks, y'all. See you next time. I'm gonna hit a trail.